Welcome to Talks with Tracy, with certified hypnotherapist, life coach, and licensed mental health professional, Tracy Claremont. Tracy will share her healing journey and explore the many meaningful alternative healing methods in our world today that will support you in doing your own deepest emotional healing. So please welcome the host of Talks with Tracy, Tracy Claremont. Let the suffering end and the healing begin.
Hello and welcome to Talks with Tracy. I'm your host, Tracy Claremont, coming to you live on the Bold Brave Television Network. I always like to start with gratitude whenever possible. So thank you all for taking the time to listen to my show. I send love and appreciation to each and every one of you. And thank you, Bold Brave Television Network, for having me. So I am so excited today to have the amazing and incredible Michelle Lundstrom back with me again today. Now, Michelle was with me last week on episode number 64 of Talks with Tracy. And on that episode, she shared her remarkable story about how her intuitive superpowers were just like thrown into high gear after being struck by lightning. And she is an shamanic intuitive, excuse me. So if you haven't watched that already, please do so. Goodness. So today she is back, and we're going to talk about the importance of living in our authenticity, living our true selves, being our true selves, and living in an authentic way. And this is absolutely one of my favorite topics, and you can expect to hear lots more on this from me in the future. I really feel passionate about inspiring people to live in their authenticity, to be themselves and really reach that fulfillment. So, but how do we get started on this? You know, so often, myself included, we find ourselves living in the expectations of others. Now, I've done a lot of work around that, but for years I lived in the expectations of others, and I was like a little robot doing what I was supposed to be doing. But how do we break free from all of that people pleasing behavior, all of that self sacrifice? uh, to reach a place where we're living life for ourselves. So again, often we feel stuck in this. And I'm here to tell you it is not selfish to live a life for yourself, to put yourself up at the top of that list of priorities. And in fact, it is essential to do so. Uh, it's essential to achieving a life of fulfillment and joy and contentment. So I cannot wait to start this conversation with Michelle. For those of you who are not familiar yet with the amazing Michelle Lundstrom, she is a shamanic intuitive channel, a Reiki master, and empath coach. She started out in the world of healing as a licensed mental health therapist, and now she has moved fully into her incredible intuitive gifts, and those are the services that she is focused on providing. She utilizes spirit guides and Akashic records in her work. She is an absolute expert on energy points within us, otherwise known as chakras. And she reads chakra energies, and she helps people to correct imbalances in their energy fields. So we're going to talk about that today as well. She's the perfect person, though, to talk about all how the many things in our lives cause us to be out of balance and cause us to fall into patterns of behavior that work against our living a full life and living in our authenticity, living life for ourselves. So let's get started. Please join me in welcoming the amazing and beautiful Michelle Lundstrom back to the show.
Hello.
Yay! Hi, Michelle. So good to
Hi.
see you. I'm
Oh, it's
so
so good to
excited
be
to have
back.
you
Thank
back.
you.
Yeah, I really enjoyed our conversation last week, and I'm so happy to have you here today to talk about one of my very favorite topics, which is really, moving into our authenticity and being ourselves. I've been in that process for years. I know that you've been in that process for years. So we have
Mhm.
our own personal experiences, and now we're both committed, I would say, to helping others. And I've spoke previously about this feeling of being stuck, and I have come to understand and recognize that that is actually like an illusion. We're never really stuck and not moving because we are energetic beings. So, uh, actually, when we're stuck, it might be that maybe our energy is slowed down, or maybe it's like pushing up against a block that's like resistance or things like that. But it's always, energy is always moving in us. Is that correct?
Absolutely, and you just kinda nailed it, right? Nothing is actually ever truly stuck, but we get energy that isn't moving or isn't flowing. The other thing that we get in our energy field, also known as the biofield, so if we think about modern medicine, we'll talk about
Mm,
it more in the concept of the biofield, and that's how MRIs and CAT scans and all of that work. So
mm,
by measuring that. And so when we are looking at stuck energy in the body, what I'm looking at energetically is sometimes old thought forms. So there'll be something floating, a belief
mm,
system or a trauma from the past that's kind of floating in the person's biofield or body. And that energy keeps influencing and keeps a repeated pattern going. And so when we can kind of hone in on that and look at that and say, oh, there's this belief that I, I don't know what I'm doing. And then we look at it and it comes
mm,
from a well meaning, loving parent. This happened just the other day where I was doing a reading and it came from this guy's dad, who was this sweet, loving man, kept saying, are you sure you know what you're doing? The dad just loved
mm,
to help. But what happened was that message of, are you
mm,
sure you know what you're doing, got stuck in this person's field. And so, with everything that they did, even though they were very capable, very highly intelligent human being, they just kept getting
mm,
stuck in that, wait, do I know what I'm doing? And so when we
mm,
can look at that, we would call that stuck energy, because what other language do we have for it? It's kind of stuck in the field. But that
mm.
doesn't mean that it's trapped there forever. And I think that's kind of what you're getting to, is that doesn't mean that that is something we need to just surrender and accept, like, oh, this is how it's going to be. We can really figure out what's going on, what's under that, what's the root of this thing that keeps getting in my way from being and expressing more freely as my authentic self.
Right, absolutely. I love that example you gave. When I started transitioning from doing like regular mental health therapy into hypnotherapy was my first stop. Um, I did that because I loved working in the subconscious mind. And when you're talking about this stuck energy of in the world of hypnotherapy, that would be considered core beliefs that we
Mhm.
carry in our subconscious mind, and that they kind of like drive the bus. They're always playing in our subconscious mind, and that's what we are living our life off of. That's what's generating our life experience. So I
Mhm.
love the explanation that you just gave, because uh, I've had it explained to me and I practice it in other ways, but I've never heard it put quite the way you just put it, and I really appreciate that. That I will use that
You're
in the
welcome
work
to
that
use
I'm
that.
yeah,
Yes.
in the work that you're doing. And also, I expect that you would agree that um, the example that you just gave with this person's dad, a well-intending dad who probably wanted his child to be successful and everything, and was trying to be helpful, but in the process, he kind of programmed and conditioned his son to have self doubt, to
Mhm.
have some doubts about his own ability, like, do I know what I'm doing? I don't know, which can be translated into, I don't know what I'm doing, which
Yeah.
can cause a lot of problems. But there's all sorts of programming and conditioning that happens, and we're not born, um, you know, not believing in ourselves. right?
Hmm.
When we're born, we fully believe in ourselves, and
Yeah.
then we're conditioned out of it. Um, so, can you talk a little bit about your perspective on that as far as falling into patterns where we stifle our authenticity?
Yeah, there's so many things that come into our programming that we start to believe or we buy into because we're told
Mm.
it over and over on repeat. And like from hypnosis, that's kind of how those subconscious beliefs then get deeply embedded in the mind and become a core
Mhm.
belief. So if I'm told something over and over and over like that, then it becomes kind of this indoctrination, this patterning in the energy field that we start to grab. And one example that comes to mind is this came up in a reading the other day where the person was talking about like using chat gpt to write their papers and how they were angry that they were getting in trouble for that. And so as I was reading that and exploring that, I started thinking back to, oh, when I was a child, I was told you're not going to have a calculator everywhere you go. And now I'm living this life where I have a calculator everywhere that I go. And so and then I started looking at that and I started looking in the energy and I was like, wow, this is really interesting because what I was seeing was there's a point that we begin to connect with higher consciousness and we no longer need to write papers or do school in the way that we're doing them. And so just like it would have been nice if the teachers would have listened to those of us back then that were saying, I will have access to a calculator. We knew something. We didn't
Mm,
know we collectively knew something, but we knew something. And I feel like these younger generations know something. And so when they're
mm,
looking up and writing their papers, it could be that it needs to shift to, okay, guys, look it up on ChatGPT and then go ahead and take some time to talk about what ChatGPT told you. And that gets them
mm,
then connecting again. And so it's we know from the telepathy files of these nonverbal autistic children that they can access and download an entire language in the higher consciousness field. So, where we're
mm,
going as a species, where we're going as humanity, there we've got to listen to these kids. And instead, we're programming them, we're indoctrinating
mm,
them to sit still in their chairs, which is the worst thing we can tell them to do. We are meant to move. We are meant to make sound. We are meant for energy to be flowing and moving. And just like that stuck energy ball, that gentleman had of, do you sure you know what you're doing? Had he been flowing with that, had his dad been able to fully believe in him and say, no, this kid knows what he's doing and he's feeling
yeah.
confident in that. So I'm just going to kind of trust the wisdom of this collective consciousness of children. And there's so many things that we're told. Like my first, I call it my first disillusionment with trusting what I'm taught. And that was when I was reading that the BMI charts were
Mm,
actually created by a health insurance company to gauge health insurance rates. And that's still what
mm,
is used today. It is not based on medical science. And, you know, my training as a mental health therapist, I was appalled when I was looking at the DSM for the post traumatic stress disorder diagnostics in the manual and saw that if somebody gets PTSD from virtual reality, then that's not PTSD. And again, that's not based on science, that's based on who was on the board making the decisions of what that criteria was. So there's so many things that are important
mhm,
to be looking at and discerning as we try and find our authentic self. That's a part of like thinking for yourself and looking at things and questioning with curiosity, not with anger. Like these are just things that have happened. We've made mistakes as humanity. And so let's look at them and learn from them and grow and learn to trust the wisdom of the children. Learn to be able to, as a collective, say, oh, wait, this BMI chart isn't based on science. Could we get something else? Could we get a food pyramid that's based on science? Could we get, you know, more truth out there for ourselves, which
mm.
helps us to live that more authentic life.
Right. Yeah, and then I mean, there's, uh, for the longest time, I'll speak for myself. For the longest time, I didn't know that all of the information I was being fed just in society and the world on TV and the media, things like that. I didn't
Mhm.
know that all of that wasn't absolute truth. In fact, I was pretty naive when I was younger. And when I went off to college, I went from Ronan, Montana to Berkeley, California, which was a pretty big culture shock. And I remember sitting in a social sciences class, and the professor, he was giving a whole presentation, a whole lecture on the news and in the media, and he was talking about how it was controlled and agenda based, and we only heard what they wanted us to hear and all of that. And I
Mhm.
can remember being completely devastated by
Yeah.
that. I mean, I was so upset. I went to my dorm room. I called my dad. I was sobbing, crying. I'm like, did you know that the news isn't always the truth? and
Yeah.
and he just, like, talked me off the ledge and calmed me down. But I can remember moments like that, disillusionment. And I could even, like, today, I my doctor prescribed me a medication, and when I went to try to get it, the pharmacy wouldn't give it to me because their algorithm said I had to take a different medicine first for a certain period of time before I could get the one that my doctor said was most appropriate
Mhm.
for me. Well, what sense does that make? I'm going to take a medicine I don't that my doctor doesn't recommend, so I can get the one that is recommended per my insurance and per pharmacy algorithms. It's
Yeah.
just crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And as we learn to speak up as a collective, as we learn to speak up as a larger group and say, we want these decisions to be made based on actual research, facts, data, then
Hmm.
things will have to change. But there has to be a much larger voice for that. And first, like you said, that awareness of that disillusionment, that everything that we hear on the news, everything we read on the internet, everything we hear isn't necessarily true. Now, it may be someone's truth, and there may be an agenda. There's layers and layers of
Hmm.
reasons why something may be put out there for us to believe. But if we keep holding on to these collective old belief systems, then
Hmm.
we're not reaching our authentic self because we're not thinking for ourselves. We're not becoming the observer of our thoughts
Hmm.
and the observer of ourselves.
Right. I was just going to throw out a quote that I heard from you, and that is exactly what you just said. Become an observer of your own thoughts. I, it, it's exactly what we're talking about. Becoming aware of our own thoughts and how they influence us. Um, I also heard you say at one point that 90% of our thoughts are the same thoughts as we
Mhm.
had the day before. Can you talk a little bit about that and how we might break this
Yeah.
up?
Yeah, which is so fascinating, right? That's why we believe the news. That's why we believe that the BMI chart is something based in some sort of scientific research, right? Is because 90% of our thoughts are exactly the same thoughts that we had yesterday. Wake up, brush teeth, make coffee, go to work, right? It's the same thing, and it's those things that have uniqueness, nuances that kind of shake us out of that, right? You went to that
Mhm.
class and it
Okay.
shook you, and you started having all kinds of original thoughts. That day in your life, that day in Tracy's life, right, in Berkeley, California, you had way more than 90, you know what I mean, 90% of your thoughts probably were original thoughts that day at that point. And
Hmm.
so because it really shook that loose. And so
Yeah.
what we have is this concept of the lower mind, that mind, the brain that just kind of goes on repeat. And like I was talking about, these children that are saying we don't need to write these papers or do education this way or memorize in this way, they're right, because where they're going to be proved right over time. And so that takes us out of that 90% of our thoughts are the exact same as they were yesterday, because it's a new and original thought that moves us into the higher mind, the soul, the consciousness, um, that bigger field of knowledge and information. Otherwise, the lower mind is just on repeat, taking care of the human body, taking care of the
Mhm.
routine in the day, yelling at the kids, and just doing the day to day things. So, part of becoming our authentic self is about being able to have that originality of thought. And so, just practicing breaking that up a little bit by, watching a podcast like this, or this listening to this starts to break up that 90% of thoughts being the same, because I'm going to
Mhm.
say he's going to say things that spark an original thought. Whether you agree or disagree with us, it's going to get you thinking outside of that classic thought loop that you kind of have day to day. Now, not everyone does that. The As people are kind of waking up more and getting more and more in tuned with who and what they are, there's a lot more of that
Mhm.
original. We explore spirituality as we question, is this news true, or what probably is the truth in this or that.
Mhm. Right. And then again, it's a journey because uh, it again, we've been conditioned and programmed to the point where it is difficult to step out of what the expected train of thought is
Mhm.
and really go into something that is different from maybe what you grew up with or different from the norm. You know,
Mhm.
I am now I can say that everybody knows how Tracy is, who Tracy is in my, especially in my inner circle, you know, and
Mhm.
the way I talk about things and the way I express thoughts and feelings and all of these things, and they're used to me. But all of those kind of ways about myself, I kept under wraps for the longest time, uh,
Mhm.
because it was different from, even as an adult. I mean, I can understand kids feel pressure to fit in and to be the same as their peer group. But I'm not even talking about when I was a kid. This is like, my 20s, my 30s, into my
Mhm.
40s, even where
Yeah.
I was, being this person to fit the norm. And so um, I'm thankful now that I can just, live freely and let loose and be myself. But it kind of amazes me when I think back, um, about the journey that it was and
Mhm.
how much effort and life experience it took to get me to that place. I would love it if people maybe don't have to wait until their mid 40s to come into their own and start speaking their truth and things like that. But I also know that people came here, everybody came here to learn, souls came here to learn and have life experiences. So I understand that piece of it too. But I kind of think back and think, wow, if I'd have known some of this stuff when I was in my 20s, I could
Mhm.
have saved myself a lot of pain and suffering. But
Yes.
then I wouldn't be at the place I am now. So
Yeah. So
I
maybe
don't
your
know.
journey happened exactly the way it was meant to.
I'm sure it did. I know it did. I know it did. But oh, you have a puppy.
Yeah. Sorry. Somebody's outside the door and he's getting upset.
Oh,
Okay. He's going back to bed.
is he?
Sorry about that.
No problem.
Yeah.
I love dogs. So, we are gonna take a commercial break here in a minute or so. When we come back, I'd love to talk about another thing that you said before, is that you read intuitively people's
Mm.
parts, and you
Yes.
described that in your example you used. I'd like to talk more about that because it's super helpful when
Mhm.
you're in a situation where you're having somebody read your parts. And then I'd like to just kind of get into chakra energies and maybe talk about things that you commonly see held in the different chakra energy fields. Can we do that when we come back?
Oh, absolutely. That'd be fun. Yes.
Okay, awesome, awesome. We'll take a brief commercial break. Thanks for watching. You're watching Talks with Tracy on Bold Brave Television. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
What if there were a super tiny device that could diagnose the brain and is smaller than a single human hair? What if you could see inside the brain to help an epilepsy patient during surgery or to help the fight against Parkinson's disease? Dr. Patricia Broderick is proud to announce the Broderick Probe, a biomedical and electronic breakthrough. Imagine a probe to help with the understanding and potential cure of brain-related diseases. To learn more, listen live to the Easy Sense radio show with host Dr. Broderick, Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern on the Bold Brave TV network. And to help support the Broderick Foundation, please go to easysense.com and learn how, with your help, we can fight these horrific brain disorders. That's easysense.com to learn more and help support the Broderick Foundation. Author, radio show host, and coach John M. Hawkins reveals strategies to help gain perspective, build confidence, find clarity, achieve goals. John M. Hawkins' new book, Coached to Greatness, Unlock Your Full Potential with Limitless Growth, published by iUniverse. Hawkins reveals strategies to help readers accomplish more. He believes the book can coach them to greatness. Hawkins says that the best athletes get to the top of their sport with the help of coaches, mentors, and others. He shares guidance that helps readers reflect on what motivates them, rediscover and assess their core values, philosophies, and competencies, find settings that allow them to be the most productive, and track their progress towards accomplishing goals. Listen to John Hawkins' My Strategy, Saturdays, 1 p.m. Eastern on the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio.
Welcome back to Talks with Tracy, coming to you live on the Bold Brave Television Network. I have the honor and privilege today of visiting with the amazing and beautiful Michelle Lindstrom. You are truly a remarkable, intuitive healer. Your intuitive gifts are just amazing, and you facilitate healings within people with your great gifts. So, Michelle, before the break, we were talking about, we were talking about so many things. We were talking about things that inhibit our being our true authentic selves. And then when our being our authentic self is inhibited, when we have to stuff it down and live as somebody other than who we are, of course that's going to mess with our energy fields, right? Where it's not going to be good for us, and over an extended period of time it manifests itself as symptoms that are quite difficult for us. And these are all things that create imbalances, and these are all things that you help people through. And I do want to say, like, this isn't all woo-wooey, right? This is scientifically proven that we have energetic bodies. You mentioned the biofield, and one of my friends, Susie Wu, who you would love, by the way, she's a friend of the show as well. She actually has a machine that she uses in her energy healing that measures the energetic aura around somebody, and she uses it at the beginning, and she does the healing, and she measures it at the end. And there's significant difference in the auric field through moving the energy and facilitating healing. So this is scientifically proven, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, we can see it in the biofield. I have a biofeedback aura camera that I also use for
Oh, nice.
that, where people can kind of see what that energy looks like and see it in real time too. So I'll have them sometimes think about the thing, or we'll activate the part in them and watch their entire aura and their biofield change and shift in color and energy and how big or how small it is. So it's absolutely fascinating now that we have so many like amazing smart people that are like finding ways to measure these things. And there's so many different scientific things that we can kind of correlate and connect to, like with the human heart, for example, right? If we want to look at that, if we look at why do people confuse anxiety attacks and heart attacks, right? Which is a really confusing thing for people. Now, people that have had both tell me that there's a very clear, distinct difference for them between the two, but the
Mhm.
reported symptoms are the same. And part of the reason why is when we have a trauma or we have a stressor, we have our body encapsulates a neuropeptide. And that neuropeptide is holding the energy of the trauma. That can be measured, that can be seen in a lab. And where they tend to
Mm.
accumulate is right around the top of the heart. Well, if we look at that top of the heart space, it's, you know, the spot that comes up for everything with a heart attack. And so it's right there. All the major
Mm.
arteries are there. And so that's why an anxiety attack and a heart attack have similar symptoms, because you've got all those neuropeptides encapsulated there. And that's part of why
Mm.
when somebody is facilitating a healing session, it's so important to drink water afterwards and flush
Mhm.
out those neuropeptides when they get stirred up, when there gets some movement in the body. Because again, we don't want to be perfectly still. We want movement in the energy. We want flow in the energy and the room and the
Mhm.
space for different parts of ourselves to begin to show up and surface so we can work with them and help them to heal.
Yeah, when I was listening to Dr. Gabor Mate, he was talking about he's a medical doctor, and he was talking about a scientific study that linked stress and anxiety in a parent to asthma in their
Mhm.
children.
Yeah.
And that really made sense to me, because if you think about stress and anxiety, which is fear based, so if you think
Mhm.
about fear, it's constricting, right?
Yes.
When you're scared, you can't breathe, and everything just tenses up for
Mhm.
the fight, flight, freeze, fawn kind of response. So it all makes sense within our bodies. But
Yeah.
when we think about it energetically, if we're in that state all the time and so constricted
Mhm.
and so tight and everything, we actually can, in my opinion, pass that on to that energy. We kind of pass that on to our kids who are
Mhm.
in tune and connected with us. So I really thought
Yeah.
that study was interesting.
It gets encoded in for sure. And with that, as you're talking about that constriction, it makes me think about a lot of times when I'm reading people that are stuck, right? We kind of talked about it can be moved, but when I'm reading people like that, a lot of times what I see is when they're contracting the body and they're contracting the muscles and they're shallowing the breath, they're also contracting that bigger biofield. And sometimes I'll see people
Mm-hmm.
that their biofield, their energy field is just like pasted to them and pasted to their body.
Mm-hmm.
And so, in teaching people how to kind of expand and breathe that out, not only opening up the body, but opening up the biofield or the aura, is another language for that. It helps to kind of feel a little bit more free and what
Mm-hmm.
we were talking about earlier with the discernment of, is this truth, is this not truth? We can, when that field is bigger, we're picking up on more information, more data that helps us to discern truth or not truth. So it's so
And
important
would you
to
say
manage
like we're more accurately picking up on data? Is that what you're saying? So maybe if our auric field is expanded and in a, for lack of a better word, like a healthier place, um, we can know what's true and what's not true. We can think through things more of, what do I actually believe? And then if that's the case, we are less likely to be manipulated
Yes,
by falsehood.
exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
So if you think about it, have you ever been in a room and somebody walked in and you thought, whew, they have a big energy?
Oh yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
There's that awareness, whether you can see it or feel it, or you'll know. There's a knowingness of that person, and that what we're referring to is that biofield. And so when we feel that energy, the reason we're saying they have a big energy is suddenly that's, think of circles, right? Circles overlapping. And some people have are covering the entire room. Some people are just their chair, right? Some people are going
Mm.
about 6, 7 feet out, which is where most of us sit in an average moment. But yeah, we're getting information then from the other person. And, there's kind of a quantum version of that for like you and I who are on this platform. It's more like an airdrop version of where we are feeling each other's energy field, but it's a little bit more of an airdrop kind of experience. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, that's super interesting. I like that. So, can you just briefly, because I know we could do like 5 episodes on chakra energies.
Mhm.
Uh, can you just briefly mention what and we'll just stick to the seven
Yeah.
most talked about chakra energy fields. Could you just mention those? And in mentioning them, I'd love for you to tie them to examples of
Mhm.
people you've worked with, like what when you see some imbalance in, say, the root chakra, what that has played itself out in with different people you've worked with. Can you kind of go through that a little bit?
Mhm. So, let me first talk about what chakras are really quick, right? So,
Yes,
chakra
please.
means wheel. So, think about a spinning wheel of energy, right? We've been talking all about energy today, which is what I read is energy, everything
Mhm.
energy. And so, when that wheel is spinning, where that wheel comes from is the meridian. So, if you think about if you've ever been in an acupuncturist's office, you see this meridian chart on their wall. And if you notice, they all start to bundle and those meridians all start to connect. And that's connecting to um, the 7 main chakras, is what we'll talk about today. But it's also connecting into the palm chakras, and there's chakras both in your body and outside of your field as well. But the root chakra, that base chakra, it's at the base of the spine, often associated with the color red. And that's a really foundational chakra. So when something is off in that chakra, the meaning that comes through is going to be filtered in a little bit different, because that's age 0 to 2 in development. So if you look at that developmental time of 0 to 2 in
Mhm.
infancy to 2, and I want that sense of belonging. It's that I belong here in a body, right? So when
Mm.
that's showing up for someone and I'm working with them, and there's this, I'm having trouble being connected. That happens a lot with star seeds. That happens a lot with people with trauma, where they want to kind of pop out of their bodies and not really
Mm.
be integrated into their nervous system and into their body. And
Right.
then,
Can I just share something real quick?
yeah,
So I had a reading from you, which was amazing.
yeah,
And you gave me such helpful information about how I had an issue with my root chakra and being grounded, that I
mhm,
have struggled throughout my lifetime to be grounded. And I think like some people who know me would say, "Oh wow, you seem like a grounded person," um, but I have struggled with that. Kind of my internal world. I have struggled with
mhm,
that. And you knew nothing about my history, my early childhood, anything like that. And what came through when you were reading that was that
mhm,
I never committed to this body that I have.
mhm,
And and I know there was a reason for that, because when I was in utero, my hip dislocated, and it was super painful. And I was like, I'm not sure I want to be in this body.
yeah,
This hurts.
yeah,
I don't think I want to do this.
mhm,
I did ultimately choose to do that, but you brought in a knowing for me that I have never truly committed to my body, because it represented pain from the
mhm,
get go.
yeah,
And then it showed itself up in my root chakra. So that's an example from my own personal experience with you of
mhm,
really good information that I gathered, and something, so now I can take it and I can work on that and I
mhm.
can change that. Yeah, so I didn't mean to interrupt, but I just wanted to share my own
Oh,
experience
Tracy,
with you.
that's a beautiful example. And being able to really ground in, right? Like you said, people would normally see you as a pretty grounded person with what you do for a living. My assumption, my human would probably assume that. And the
Right.
energy already always knows. So again, that stuck energy concept, right? That this trauma was stuck in there,
Mm.
right? Making it harder for you to really truly ground. Plus, you're so kind of connected up to, the higher realms that it's more comfortable there. It's more natural for
Yeah.
you up there. So that makes sense too.
Mhm.
And so,
Mhm.
yeah, as we look at those chakras, there's so much information that they can share with us. The energy can share with us. And yeah, so when I'm talking about communicating with the chakras, I know that can sound a little weird, but
Mhm.
it's all energy. I'm reading the energy, and the energy has a lot of information encoded in it. And like I was saying at the beginning, right? If there's this ball of energy, like the guy whose dad was well-meaning, right? That was
Mhm.
stuck in one of his chakras as well as in his field, and obviously that's where those subconscious beliefs then kind of start to formulate. So then as we
Mm.
move up into the next chakra, we have right above the root, we have the sacral chakra. And it is all about sexuality, it's all about creativity, right? We're getting a little bit older now. And I see this a lot of times, there's a lot of creative blocks for people, where they get kind of so caught up in the mental, um, I guess the mentalness of life, right?
Mm.
If just there's so many things, and we're constantly being bombarded with data and information, and forget to do our craft, whether that's our art form is singing or writing poetry or dancing or painting. There's so many different forms
Mhm.
of creativity, creating a podcast. There's all kinds of forms of creative outlet. And I do see a lot of people really stuck with not being able to access or express that creative flow very well. And that gets kind of stuck in there. But if we look at kind of the sense of belonging, right? When we look at that chakra, we're more at looking at, I belong not just here on this planet in a body, but I kind
Mhm.
of belong in this body. There's a much more kind of womb energy to that. And then we
Mm.
move up to the solar plexus, which is our power center. So that's below the heart, above the belly button. And it incorporates a lot of our organs. And that power center is kind of how we kind of express that personal power. So we're getting into a little bit older age of development when this chakra comes
Mhm.
online. And it's not just, I belong on earth, I belong in a body, but like, I belong with family, I belong with community, I belong with others. And so a lot of times, this chakra will kind of be off when somebody's not able to stand in their power or feels like they need to
Mm.
keep themselves chronically small. I see a lot of
Mm.
that in this energy center.
Mm.
And then we move up into the heart chakra. And that heart chakra is a very large chakra. It's kind of that center point where we have the lower chakras below it and we have the upper chakras above it. And the heart is so key to everything. Um, you know, broken hearts, like a lot of times when people are going through broken hearts, like your heart chakra is kind of tender today. And so just
Mm.
kind of being able to know that sometimes that's meant to be. So there's times where somebody's heart chakra might be a little bit tighter. They never really close, but so I'll say contracted. And it's important to contract it sometimes because we have to get through our day and there may be something
Mm.
weighing on us. And so those otherwise we'll cry all day, right? So there's
Mhm.
times for that chakra to do that and it's appropriate. And I think we kind of get this image sometimes that as we like if we're to go do a chakra balancing and open up all your chakras. Well, there's times where they're meant to be more contracted. And when I'm
Mm.
doing a reading, I'm looking a lot of times at like, where's the stuck energy? What's the bigger picture? What's the heart wanting to say? And you have a
Mhm.
beautiful heart, right? So
Oh,
overall, your heart message is very loving. Like you know how to love. You
thank
know
you.
how. You're good at it. There's a
Mm-hmm.
flip side of that. Every now and then you need to take your heart, and it kind of needs to kind of come in and really be protected and not be expansive out in the world, because there can be things going on. So that's really important to kind of know that balance of, it's so much more than just getting a chakra in balance in any given moment.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And then we
Yeah.
move up after our heart, we've got our throat chakra. So now we're starting to move into those upper chakras. And the throat chakra, it has to do with our voice and being able to express ourselves in the world. And so not only do I belong in a body, but I can express myself in this body, right? And in the solar plexus, I can take up some space in this body too. So when
Mm-hmm.
we're looking at that throat, I see a lot of females closing that throat chakra down. And I see a lot of males having permission to have it wide open. And I think some of that is that indoctrination, that beliefs of, certain, if you're born in a certain body, you're supposed to be quiet. And if you're born in another body, you get to have a voice. And those things aren't true. But some of us buy into it. And those of us who shut down our throat chakra can buy into that. And at the very beginning of this call, even your throat chakra and my throat chakra were like kind of doing this this thing. And as we've been talking, both of our throat chakras have gone through a bit of a healing process as we've been on the call. So it's really interesting when we can just kind of watch and see what happens with them as we go ahead and open up that voice too, and feel comfortable expressing ourselves in the world. And the throat chakra is also about listening. So sometimes it comes in that someone's not listening. Sometimes it comes in that someone's not expressing it when it's kind of contracted. And there can be a multitude of reasons behind that, of why people might have that experience. And
Right.
then yeah. So after that, we get up into the third eye chakra, which is at the forehead. And that is often associated with that clairvoyance, that knowing, that deep knowing. And each of the chakras, if we had time, I could go through, they all have a different intuitive gift with them. And so that's always kind of fun to look at the chakras and the intuitive gifts of those. But this chakra is really, I see it out of balance for a lot of people. I met with a woman yesterday who, her third eye just keeps coming out of balance, and it's constantly like contracted. And what it has to do with is she has a very analytical job, and she keeps spinning in
Mm.
all of this analytical information, and is not in the intuitive flow of the information coming in through her crown, through her channel. And so as we kind of pay attention to that, when we comes into our awareness, like you said earlier, then we can start to take that from there and do something about it.
Mm-hmm.
And then our crown chakra, their seventh chakra, is above the head, and it's more like a tornado above the head. And it's that what connects us up to that higher consciousness, source, self, whatever you want to call that higher power, universe. And that's where that information starts to come through. So when people are really connected to, being a channel like I am, that is often expansive and wide open when that information is coming through. But I don't want it to be that way all the time, every day. And
Mm.
so it's learning how to know when to open and bring it into a smaller open at other times. And that has to do with our faith, trusting and believing, like knowing what our truth is with
Mm-hmm.
spirituality, whether that's nature or higher power, or just in yourself, whatever that is, that gets impacted by that crown chakra. And that happens, we really start to see that open up around the age of, 45, 50. We really start moving into
Mm.
these higher chakras. And part of the reason we see people that are elders have such great wisdom is they've opened up all of those chakras developmentally, and are moving then after 50 into those higher realm chakras that we don't have time for
Okay,
today.
so well, that okay. I'm making a note. That's a whole other show that we are going to do in the future. That's interesting that you say though, as like in that the 40s into the 50s, that is where our energies start to shift and move. I think that's really interesting because I was just talking about how, it took me all of these years to get to
Mhm.
this place. And, in my human mind, I'm like, wouldn't it have been easier to figure this out in my 20s? And then look how far I would have been able to get then. But again, it's not meant to be that way. So I do look forward to having you on again because I would love to talk about some specific kind of symptoms that are created in people, like migraines or skin conditions, things like that. Like what you see as far as that in regard to
Mhm.
energies. But unfortunately, we don't have time right now to do that. But I'm excited to have you back on. So I'm going to be hitting you up for more shows. Be
Yes, I would
warned.
love to come back. Yes, thank you.
Yes. Uh, can we just briefly, and we only have like a minute and a half left, but um, I mentioned that I have had like kind of a rough week, and you mentioned my heart space just briefly. Had a rough week emotionally, things like that. When you read me just quickly right now, do you see some constriction in my heart space, or what might you see?
Yeah, I see it constricted with some intentionality, and then when I tune into your field immediately, I feel like I want to cry. I'm also seeing feeling a lot of tension in the back of the neck, moving into the jaw.
Mm,
Like you're clamping down your energy, but you're clamping it down in the upper part of your body. You're not fully grounded. You're not fully rooted in. You're kind of in the heart and up, and so that's a part of disassociation, but you're not totally disassociated, right? Because you're kind of hooked into your body in that way, and the rest of you is kind of floating above.
mm,
And that's protection right now. So that's I don't want to be fully in this reality and right now, and I don't
mm,
want to feel all of that. But the parts where you are in your body, you're doing a lot of that tightening of the muscles. With the jaw and things like that. So you may want to do a little jaw massage later on and just kind of intentionally relax your neck a little bit, relax those forehead muscles. Your eyes are also holding a lot of tension, which is telling me there's something I don't like what I see. And so being
mm.
able to just kind of close your eyes and let them rest a little bit later and just um, with set the intention. My eyes can relax and put your eyes on then something that you want to see.
Beautiful. Thank you for that.
You're
Just
welcome.
Um, I love an example, and just briefly for those of you out there, my son shipped out to the Army this week, so I cried for 2 days. And I was also having some trouble in my household with some of the people in my home that was really upsetting to me. So lots of emotion, and you nailed it. That's exactly what you just said. I will use that. So please tell us how we can reach you. I did include your website on the end of the description for this show, but please tell us how we can reach you for services. You're amazing.
Yes. Oh, thank you, Tracy. I appreciate that. My website is Luminous Ignis, Luminous Luminous, Ignis, IGNUS.com. And all of my social media is under the same name. And you can find my links to my Instagram, Facebook, YouTube on my website.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here, and I look forward to having you back. It's been such a great talk. And I want to send appreciation and love out there to everybody who takes the time to watch Talks with Tracy. So I will be here next week. Please join me then. It's been such a nice talk. Thank you, Michelle. We'll see you next time.
Oh, thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
This has been Talks with Tracy. Join us each week as Tracy and her guests will come together and realize that underneath it all, we are all the same and never alone. So join us each week and let Talks with Tracy be your safe place to land in your healing journey. Right here, Thursdays, 11 a.m. Eastern on the Bold Brave TV network.